Delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Miyares.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, this day we've had a pretty amazing moment of incredible history makers. I rise to recognize a great Virginian, an unknown patriot, and someone for so long who's not been recognized. Last week, my colleague from Hanover noted that one of the worst crimes a nation could do is to forget their heroes, and that was the impetus for me to give some remarks about someone that I have always seen in history and admired but know so little, and I wanted to share this with this body, particularly since it is Black History Month. I want to point out someone who's indeed one of those forgotten heroes. Right outside the doors of this chamber, if you go to the left, there is a fantastic, amazing, beautiful mural of the Battle of Yorktown. It is something that we all celebrate. But that victory would not have happened for an unknown hero who, not for his own work, risking his life and limb, we have not won that victory, and we may not have won our new nation. The forgotten hero's name was James Armistead. He was born a slave here in Virginia, most likely, they think, in New Kent County. We don't know much about his early life or his motivation, but in 1781, James Armistead volunteered his service to the great French general Marquis de Lafayette, our most famous French ally during the war. However, because he was a slave, he did not control his own destiny. It was not his decision to make. He had to receive permission, which was granted. And then James Armistead became one of America's first super spies, like something out of a thriller, posing as a runaway slave to the British Army, claiming that he had information on General Washington and General Lafayette's forces. In 1781, he went to the camp of British General Lord Cornwallis and risked his life and limb to move back and forth between American camps, picking up intelligence and troop placement and arm placements along the way, reporting back to General Lafayette and General Washington the critical information necessary to win the battle and win our nation. Every time James Armistead stuck between the lines, he risked his life. Every time he gave critical intelligence to General Washington and Lafayette. This was the era before spy satellites, before communication intercepts. This was brave, tough, difficult, harrowing work. And if he was caught, it would mean absolute certain death. As Greg Elder of the Central Intelligence Agency noted, history repeatedly has demonstrated that inferior forces can win when their leaders are armed with accurate intelligence. It was James Armistead's critical and accurate intelligence that led to the victory in that mural we see right outside these doors. How was he rewarded? He was ignored. What is worse, Mr. Speaker, he was returned to a life of slavery. And as too often as we've seen, African-American contributions to the building of our nation, to the building of Virginia, have been ignored, and in this case, mistreated and forgotten. Horrifically, America and Virginia had forgotten one of our greatest heroes. Until 1824, in a dramatic moment, right outside the doors of this building, Marquis de Lafayette had made his triumphant return back to the United States, and he was treated like as rightly so, an unimaginable hero. There were crowds everywhere in Richmond, and he was invited by the House of Delegates to give an address to the chamber. And he's in his carriage, and he's coming up, and throngs of people were everywhere. And then in the midst of the group of cheering population, Lafayette noticed a recognizable face. He insisted the riders stop that carriage because he recognized someone among the throng of the crowd. And he waded out into the crowd, and he embraced the man who had done so much to change the course of our history. He saw and embraced James Armistead. We may have forgotten one of our most important heroes of the Battle of Yorktown, but blessedly Lafayette had not. Lafayette detested slavery. He had been so troubled at the treatment of this noble soul, he wrote a testimonial to this chamber commending James Armistead, which you can find online. Testimony was so powerful that James Armistead petitioned the Virginia Assembly for freedom, and it was granted. At that time, in gratitude of the general that had done so much, James Armistead officially changed his name from James Armistead to James Lafayette. He continued to live in New Kent County, and he eventually even received an annual pension for his work in the Revolution. James Lafayette's story is truly incredible, and Hollywood, if you're listening, this is the type of story we don't often see enough on the big screen. Mr. Speaker, James Lafayette's face doesn't adorn any of the portraits in this Capitol. There's no bust of him in this hall. There aren't any statues of him in Capitol Square. Perhaps there should be. I often think of the moments, the echoes in this building, here on Capitol grounds. Perhaps no greater moment was when one old revolutionary hero spotted a forgotten hero in the crowd, someone who had done so much to help win the victory for our new nation, and he stopped and embraced him and recognized him. This summer, we're all going to gather in Jamestown after a long session, dealing with a lot of passionate and difficult issues. Perhaps we will pause and remember that just a few miles away in Yorktown stood a man, James Lafayette, who crossed the battlefield back and forth, risking his life in secret to fight for the freedom of a new nation while being denied that freedom himself. What a remarkable story. What a remarkable man. What a remarkable Virginian, James Lafayette.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Fullercorn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.